Imagine a scientist who could see the future not through mysticism or divine visions, but through the cold, rational clarity of science. Imagine he foresaw the day when religion, blind faith, and collective ignorance would drag human civilization into a new dark age. And now we are living in the world he warned us about. Carl Sagan did not just look up at the stars, he looked straight into the darkness of the human mind. He studied ignorance, gullibility, and how they slowly replace reason with comfort. The final pages of The Demon-Haunted World were not merely science writing, they were prophecy, each line a warning bell for the world we live in today. He predicted that superstition would once again triumph over logic, that people would choose to believe what feels true rather than what is true, that humanity would enter a new dark age, not from lack of technology, but from lack of independent thought. And bitterly, it is all coming true. People no longer need churches to worship. They can worship algorithms, the new invisible gods behind social media. Instead of asking what is true, they ask, does this feel true to me? The age of emotion has devoured the age of reason. Carl Sagan once warned, we've arranged a society based on science and technology in which nobody understands anything about science and technology. This is a prescription for disaster. In 1995, while fighting a fatal disease, Sagan sat at his desk typing with trembling hands. He knew his time was short, yet he kept writing not out of fear of death, but out of fear that humanity would die first, not by bombs, but by the quiet collapse of its own curiosity. For him, the greatest danger was never war or asteroids, it was the death of reason itself. A civilization doesn't need an explosion to fall, it only needs people to stop asking why. What broke Carl Sagan's heart was not that humanity got lost by accident, but that it chose to turn away from truth. History has never lacked knowledge. It has only lacked the courage to look knowledge in the eye. His warnings did not fade naturally. They were buried systematically by hands that understood all too well the power of keeping people ignorant. Priests, politicians, and those who profit from control realize something terrifying. An educated public one that can think for itself is the hardest power to govern. So they launched a quiet war against truth. No gunfire, no blood. Their weapons were a language fear and the exhaustion of the human mind. They taught people that science is cold, dry, soulless. That scientists are just another kind of priest people of faith wrapped in the language of data. They attacked the very foundation of reason by making people doubt the idea of evidence itself. And once faith in evidence collapses, anything can be twisted. Truth no longer needs proof, it only needs to be believed. Carl Sagan foresaw this world, a society where astrology is respected more than astronomy, where crystals and energy healing are treated as medicine, where revelation feels more trustworthy than research. He wrote of a world where anyone can sell an illusion as long as it makes the buyer feel comforted, a world where critical thinking becomes a threat and comforting beliefs become a product. And tragically, this is no longer prophecy, it is live reality. People now believe the earth is flat, that vaccines are conspiracies, that climate change is a hoax, that modern medicine is a game for profit. They believe so, they no longer need evidence. Sagan called it organized intellectual laziness, a disease more dangerous than any virus because it makes people surrender their own capacity to think. When faith is abused, it ceases to be a light, it becomes a chain. What frightened Sagan most was that the promoters of superstition knew exactly what they were doing. They were not victims. They were architects. They understood the human need for comfort, for meaning, for belonging, and they weaponized it. They built a world where ignorance is praised as humility, skepticism is condemned as arrogance, and asking questions is treated as rebellion. Sagan warned, when people lose the ability to question, they become prey to any charlatan with a good story. And that is exactly what we see today, a world overflowing with charismatic deceivers. They do not need swords. They have videos, forums, and smooth sermons. They do not need proof, only the power to make you feel right. Carl Sagan knew that humanity's greatest threat was never the darkness outside, but the collapse of light within. Once intellect is replaced by blind belief, every scientific achievement becomes a tool in the hands of power, and no matter how far we travel into space, we remain chained inside our own cave. Carl Sagan understood something painfully true. The problem with humanity is not that people don't know, it's that they don't want to know. Because to know means to change, to face, to let go. But to believe, you only have to close your eyes and feel safe. The human brain wasn't built to seek truth, it was built to seek certainty. Certainty lets us sleep at night. Truth keeps us awake. And that's why most people choose a comforting story over an uncomfortable fact. Religion to Sagan was never the enemy of science. The problem begins when religion stops seeking truth and starts fearing it. It feeds the sweetest illusion that we are chosen, loved, protected by someone watching over us in the cold vastness of space. It is comforting, but it also keeps us from ever growing up. Science, on the other hand, offers no such comfort. It tells us we are a species of primates on a small planet orbiting a very average star in a galaxy among billions of others. It doesn't promise meaning, it only offers reality. And for many, reality feels too cold to believe in. Sagan saw the psychology behind it long before modern neuroscience did. When knowledge makes people anxious, they choose illusion. When evidence threatens belief, they attack the evidence. And when reason makes them lonely, they run back to the crowd, even if the crowd is running the wrong way. Religion and later modern belief systems understood this perfectly. Instead of persuading with logic, they soothe with emotion. Instead of proving, they inspire. And fragile as we are, humans fall easily for anyone who makes us feel special. Sagan once said, "Science is more than a body of knowledge, it's a way of thinking." But that way of thinking demands courage. Courage to admit we might be wrong. Courage to accept that we are small. Courage to live in a universe that promises no reward except the privilege of seeing it as it truly is. Very few are willing to do that. People would rather live in a world of order where everything has a reason, even if that reason is a myth, than accept that sometimes the universe simply is. Sagan called it the comfort of illusion. A dangerous comfort because it dulls our ability to face reality. When we grow used to believing, we forget how to question. When we grow addicted to pleasant stories, we fear anything that sounds different. And eventually, we lose the one thing that makes us human, the ability to reflect on ourselves. The more humanity advanced in technology, the more it seemed to regress in thought. We built telescopes that could see the edge of the cosmos, yet were afraid to look within. We conquered space, but not the fear that lives inside us. So Sagan wrote, not just to teach science, but to help us understand our own minds, to see why we so willingly trade truth for comfort. Because if we never face that, we won't need demons to destroy us. Voluntary blindness will do it for us. Carl Sagan feared an age when human intelligence would quietly fade right in the blinding light of technology. And today, that fear is no longer theory. It is the world we live in. Never in history have humans been so intelligent. We hold in our hands phones more powerful than the computers that sent Apollo to the moon. We talk to artificial intelligence, cross oceans in hours, edit genes, and alter the climate itself. And yet, never have we been so fragile in the face of our own ignorance. We live in a world where every answer is available, but few remember how to ask the right questions. Where information is within reach, but wisdom feels out of touch. Sagan called it the most elegant nightmare of the modern age, a high-tech civilization run by people who have no idea how their technology works. A society that depends on science, but no longer believes in science. He wrote, when people don't understand the basic principles on which their lives depend, they become vulnerable to anyone who claims supernatural powers. And we see it happening every day. People use GPS, yet insist the Earth is flat. They survive because of vaccines, yet believe vaccines are part of a global plot. They rely on computers built on quantum physics, yet dismiss science as just another belief system. The contradiction isn't technology's fault, it's the price of scientific illiteracy. When science stops being a way to understand the world, it turns into modern magic, something to consume, not to question. People no longer seek to comprehend, they worship. They don't doubt, they obey. And when that belief trembles, they respond with fear and anger. That is the dawn of a new dark age, where the light of knowledge is swallowed by the glow of personal belief. Humans grow smarter in skill, but dumber in thought. We know how to operate machines, but not how to operate our minds. We can code artificial intelligence, but can't compose a single line of critical thinking for ourselves. What frightened Sagan most was how the powerful learn to exploit this darkness. Politicians, preachers, and merchants of belief understood the less people know, the easier they are to control. They no longer fight over weapons, they fight over the definition of truth. They rebrand scientific skepticism as freedom. They turn ignorance into loyalty. And slowly they guide us back to the Middle Ages this time with high-speed Wi-Fi. Sagan saw it all 3 decades ago. He wrote in despair as if speaking directly to us today. When science and technology hold all the power, but the public understands neither who will wield that power if not the best liars. That question is no longer philosophy, it's our political reality. We live in a world where liars have microphones and honest people are accused of lacking faith, where evidence is replaced by emotion and my truth outweighs objective truth. That is the most terrifying reversal of our time. We no longer need darkness to hide ignorance, we illuminate it with screens. Carl Sagan once believed that with the right education, people would choose reason. But he also knew the ancient fear inside every human, the fear that if the universe wasn't made for us, then maybe we don't matter. That fear is the root of every religion, every ideology, every form of blindness. Sagan never opposed faith. He opposed faith without limits, because when belief no longer needs evidence, it stops being religion and becomes a weapon. And now, with artificial intelligence, social media, and psychological algorithms shaping what we see and think, we are living through the new dark age, lit by the blue glow of our screens. Carl Sagan once said, "When power and faith join hands, truth will be the first casualty." And that is exactly what's happening quietly, elegantly, completely. He understood that the ignorance of the masses is never an accident. It is a strategy. Those in power realized long ago it is far harder to control knowledge than to control fear. So they chose to spread fear and sell salvation. Religious leaders preach that science is arrogance, a rebellion against God. Politicians exploit faith to win votes, painting themselves as defenders of tradition. And corporations, cleverer than both, discovered that belief can be packaged and sold. Sagan saw the pattern long before it unfolded, a three-headed alliance of religion, politics, and money weaving an invisible net around human consciousness. Religion creates the story. Politics builds the stage. And business collects the profit from an audience hypnotized by the illusion of meaning. And they know how to make it look legitimate. They don't need to ban books only to make people stop believing in books. They don't need to silence science only to convince the public that every opinion is equally valid. Once evidence and emotion are placed on the same level, reason will always lose. Sagan called it the democracy of illusion, a society where everyone has the right to speak, but few feel responsible to listen. Where everything is my truth, and no one dares to ask, but is it true? The architects of this system are not blind. They are masters of psychology. They know that humans don't need truth to live, they need a story that makes them feel safe. And so they built markets of belief where superstition, political extremism, and conspiracy theories are sold side by side as forms of entertainment. Every time you're afraid, they profit. Every time you're angry, they gain power. Every time you believe, they stop explaining. Sagan wrote, "It is not stupidity that enslaves people, it is unexamined belief." That is the soil where every form of fanaticism grows, where cults, demagogues, and false prophets flourish. They don't need logic, they just need you to belong. From preachers who shout anti-science to politicians who call climate change a hoax, they all use the same formula, make you feel righteous and label everyone else the enemy of truth. Sagan warned that if this continues, humanity will enter a high-tech Middle Ages where cathedrals still glow, but the altars are made of screens. Where politics argues not with ideas, but with faith. Where corporations no longer sell products, but the illusion of enlightenment. What broke Sagan's heart was not the power of the system, but people's willingness to serve it. They share lies with pride, defend ignorance as virtue, and believe they are awakening, while the real manipulators are the ones who understand science, media, and psychology better than anyone. That is the bitter paradox of our time. The smartest minds are using their brilliance to keep others in the dark. And that, Sagan said, is the tragedy of intelligence without conscience. When he died, the internet was only a seed. But he already knew what it could become, either a tool of enlightenment or the greatest propaganda machine ever built. And now we know he was right. Belief algorithms have replaced gods as our judges. They decide what spreads not because it's true, but because it gets clicks. Sagan warned us. When knowledge becomes a commodity, the rich do not just own wealth, they own the truth. Carl Sagan was never a pessimist. He didn't write to mourn human ignorance. He wrote because he still believed in our capacity to awaken. In the demon-haunted world, even among its darkest pages, he planted a small seed of hope that even when surrounded by shadow humanity can still choose the light. But that light does not come from a savior or from prophets or from some miraculous technology. It comes only when each of us chooses to become a guardian of the candle of reason. He once warned, if we do not teach our children how to doubt, someone else will teach them what to believe. Sagan never tried to kill faith. He tried to return faith to its rightful humble place. Because when faith no longer needs evidence, when emotion outweighs reason, when the words of power become the measure of truth. Faith is no longer faith, it is the surrender of intelligence. We now stand at the crossroads he once described. One path leads to enlightenment, where science, compassion, and critical thought build the future together. The other leads to ruin, a world ruled by illusion, divided by belief, and led by the clever without conscience. Sagan gave us the map to escape, but that map lies in the hands of a world that no longer reads. He pleaded with us, invest in scientific education as if investing in life itself. Teach children to ask questions, because one good question can save an entire generation from manipulation. Nurture curiosity, because curiosity is the root of wisdom. And remember, doubt is not a sin, it is an act of love for the truth. Sagan believed science does not make us cold. It makes us humble and deeply kind. For when we realize we are just specks of dust in an endless universe, we stop hating one another for small things. When we see that every living being shares this fragile planet, we learn to protect rather than possess. And when we understand we are all made of stardust, we will no longer bow to the doctrines of darkness. But time is running out. Sagan is gone, yet the demons he warned about still live among us in media, in politics, in religion, and inside our own minds. They whisper, stop thinking, just believe, and all it takes is exhaustion for us to obey. So the choice is no longer philosophical, it is survival. We can cling to the comfort of illusion or walk bravely into the naked truth. We can keep living in a world where knowledge is called arrogance, or rebuild one where reason is honored as an expression of love. Sagan called it the sacred duty of the intelligent, not to dominate, but to illuminate. Not to prove we are right, but to remind humanity that truth still matters. And if you are still listening to these words, if even a small part of you longs to understand instead of merely believe, hold on to that spark. Do not let it die in the storm of noise. Because in the deepest darkness of superstition and fear, one tiny light of reason is enough to save the world. Carl Sagan once said, "We are a way for the universe to know itself." And if that's true, then our task is not only to live, but to understand. To understand so we can endure. To understand so we can love. And to understand so that even if humanity loses its way again, the universe will still have reason to hope for us.